Just sit back. Nothing is required of you except to observe the visual materials that are presented to you. Be sure to keep your fingers on the box at all times. Please proceed to our offices. Thank you for your cooperation.
You guys can count me out. Thanks for the movie, though. Welcome to Peter Klein Presents Fix the Media. You know it, I know it, the media is corrupt. And on this show we seek to clarify our vision of the world by analyzing and critiquing the news media and entertainment media. After all forms of media are vehicles for propaganda. We do that to determine what's real and what's fake, and along the way we'll figure out how to fix the media. I am Peter Klein, and this is episode number 6. Now this show is looking great, best yet, which is why it is sad that since the show premiered 6 to 7 weeks ago, close to 2 months, I've earned 1 new subscriber. And thankfully, you're subscribed, but maybe you can share it with your sewing circle or fellow nudists. Only a jump to about 100,000 subs will get some clout with YouTube, so long as I don't make any Alex Jones level mistakes. Topics in this episode include the media's love affair with science. The media and science are like 2 peas in a pod, and I'm going to give you a great example of this, and one that's very interesting. Second topic, remember when CBS was caught staging footage of people lined up for coronavirus testing? Yes, indeed. I have the raw footage, which was scrubbed from the net, so we'll briefly discuss that. Topic 3, I'll share a great source for local and national news clips you can use for research or when you're looking for one specific clip. And lastly, topic number 4, parallax effect in Apollo moon photos. I'll share just a few of my favorite and lesser known examples of NASA's shenanigans. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's get right to the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the vassal states of Clown World, and to the clever grift on which it presently teeters, one group of suckers playing God with smartphones and TikTok for almost everybody. Thank you. Our first topic today is the media's love affair with science. Science is real. Science is the way in which we employ reason in more complicated ways. Science is therefore the only path to detailed knowledge of certain things relating to nature, biology, and so forth. The media is constantly reporting either scientific news or using science to underpin either their opinions or the veracity of their reporting. Of course, I should point out that the reporting of opinion isn't news, but it is nonetheless a function of the media. But just because you listened to a Thomas Dolby song or read the word science in a press release doesn't mean any science has taken place. Everyone knows that the average person eats 5.5 spiders while sleeping each year at night. I'm sure you know that. We've all learned that at some point in our lives. Can you remember how you learned that super neat statistic? I know how I learned about it. See, I was a part of that study. All I had to do was each time I had to take a shit, I had to go down to the lab. And then they tested each molecule of my feces, and at the end of the year, they told me that the number of spiders I had consumed was, can you guess? 5.5. I was like, yes! Obviously, we learned that horse shit from the media, which no doubt passed it off as scientific news. And that's maybe a good example of the category extreme non-science. Then there are things that I'd categorize as plausible science, like things that are possible but very hard to validate or quantify. And that would include pseudoscience being presented by absolutely obvious charlatans or by apparently impeccable sources. Lastly, I think a category exists that I'd call established science, although I hate to use such an abused phrase. That would include the fully documented and replicable claims. I'm reminded of being a kid and having to make a diorama of the solar system. There are 9 planets in our solar system, so they claimed for umpteen frickin' years. Then, out of nowhere, we learned that Pluto isn't really a planet. It's made of nougat, just like Mars. Not really. But I'm starting to think of Einstein and his spooky action at a distance. Or was that Judy Wood? Didn't she say that's what brought down the towers? The current Corona-19 pandemic is an obvious present-day issue in which the media and science have merged into either the harbinger, the Paul Revere of danger, or some kind of demonic, conjoined abomination that must be destroyed immediately. At least that's how divided the world seems to be on this. Not that some people aren't more moderate in their views on the topic, but I think you can agree that this is one area where, at minimum, the media and the scientific community have failed horribly to help. I think, sadly, they don't really care. Some would say it's the media doing a horrible job and simply abusing science to serve their interests or to attract viewers. I can't say I disagree. Most scientists on an individual level seem to genuinely appreciate and respect the doctrines of science, although many are either just stupid or prone to bias for whatever reason. I'm going to present some information and personal theories about one scientific discipline I think is totally bogus and should probably be abandoned: Egyptology. As a child back in 1979, I was fortunate enough to have attended the King Tut exhibit while it was in San Francisco. And I mean, I saw nearly the entire contents of King Tutankhamun's burial chamber. Plus there were other Egyptian artifacts. So I saw that solid gold mask we've all seen a million times. I saw all the coffins. You know there were 3 coffins, right? Only the innermost coffin was solid gold. They also had like 10-foot tall Egyptian tapestries. I actually went up and touched one because I guess they didn't feel the need for anything more than a velvet rope. And I felt something touching that thousands of year old tapestry. Most everything else was under plexiglass, if I remember correctly. Now, you've heard of the Valley of the Kings and the problem of tomb robbers. Tomb robbers don't seem to be a huge problem anymore, as most tombs have already been robbed. The problem seems to have existed more around the time of the burials, even in the early dynastic period. So what's the problem, some might ask? Ultimately, these people are dead, and these valuable items are, they were never going to be seen again anyway, right? But that discounts the value of these items as tokens or totemistic, talismanic, funerary, you know what I mean. The spiritual and the religious aspects of the items, and the sanctity of the tomb. So fast forward a couple thousand years, and science comes along. So what do the scientists do? They rob the tombs, right? Okay, I get the distinction between robbing for personal gain and acquiring for greater scientific inquiry. But what if there was some other reason why excavating those burial chambers was a bad thing to do? Worse yet, what if the field of Egyptology has learned that it's a bad thing to do, and rather than face that reality, they chose instead to bend the science to serve their interests? I first began to have this notion even before I determined Ahi Awas was a gatekeeper for the deep state, and Egypt wasn't being forthright about what they know about history. I read an account of an Egyptologist excavating a tomb, most likely in the Valley of the Kings. I'm almost sure it wasn't Carter and King Tut, but I can't find the reference anymore. At any rate, this guy was describing how a tomb that contained a coffin with a mummy in it had gotten wet. So he proudly describes how they dragged the coffin out into the sun to allow the mummy to dry out. He then describes the flesh as being still somewhat flesh tone and flexible. Then he recounts how he was astonished that he could actually witness the corpse decaying right in front of his eyes. Now, I had by that time heard, like you have, I'm sure, of what Egyptians of the time thought about death and how they believed in the afterlife. I've heard that they imagined joining others in some distant star, or would join Osiris in the paradise in some other heaven-like dimension. I had learned of how the bodies were prepared, which included, removing vital organs, treating them in some way, and then wrapping them and sticking them back in. So I guess in my mind I saw the death of these pharaohs as absolute, but was still open-minded about the afterlife concept. Who knows, maybe you do go hang out with Osiris and take a boat ride in the underworld, But when reading about the pharaoh decaying in real time and the body being discovered in such good condition, something dawned on me. Remember how King Tut was buried with everything from his shoes to his luggage to his chariot even? I mean, did these people think they were coming back? And I'm not talking about the soul living on in some other dimension. I'm asking, did these people think they could be reanimated or brought back to life? In this context, isn't it interesting that these burial chambers are locked with a seal? In fact, and are they not hermetically sealed? Note that Hermes was a Greek god, but also thought to be the Egyptian god Thoth, or the two were conflated. Now, if you were planning to be resurrected or reanimated in the future, would you just allow your body to rot away in a cemetery? Or would you take steps to preserve your body? What is mummification if not preservation? They literally put the organs in jars to preserve them. Why? Let me read a couple brief translations from hieroglyphic text found in Egypt, in Egyptian tombs, in fact. Riatum, this king, Unas, has come to you, an imperishable Ak. May you rise from the horizon, from the place in which you have both become Ak. And another, I have come forth from my stoppered jar, after having spent the night in my stoppered jar, and I will appear at dawn. Now, just throw out all the crap you've heard about Egyptians being primitive goofballs. Even the translations we have to work with are probably completely tainted by that idea. Some high-status Egyptians were extremely aware of their health and also a bit manic about illness and wellness in general. Claims of finding AIDS or cancer-riddled Egyptians remains dubious to me. And you'll read that they shaved their heads as a sign of nobility and wore wigs as headdresses. But few Egyptologists promote the theory that they acquired the custom simply to prevent lice. Okay, these people were manically afraid of illness, and I believe they were suffering from fewer illnesses than we suffer from today. Certainly not obesity. I remember reading a longer, more relatable translation from one of the pharaoh's tombs. He went on and on about the plagues and of what sounded like birthmarks or rashes of some kind that were new to his people. Then he related that he hoped his death would allow him to avoid those issues. Allow me to read the first two sentences from the website cryonics.org. Imagine a world free of disease, death, and aging. At the Cryonics Institute, we believe that day is inevitably coming, and cryonics is presently our best chance of getting there. The Egyptian Book of the Dead is interesting to consider in this context. I love how some scientist puts it when they wrote, "The work is not an ancient Egyptian Bible, as some have claimed, nor is it a magical text of spells. As the afterlife was obviously an unknown realm, the Egyptian Book of the Dead was created to provide the soul of the deceased with a kind of map to help guide and protect them in the land of the dead." Okay? Yeah, no, it was not some mystical spells or whatever. It was just created to provide the soul of the deceased with a kind of guide through the land of the dead. Now, the Egyptian Book of the Dead seems to instruct a person on how to navigate the afterlife, including challenges and criteria required to get to your destination. So it is good evidence that they thought, as many do today, that the afterlife is not simply a return to this world in the distant future. But it's not proof of anything, even if we did get the translation correct. Now, as I promised earlier, I'm going to bring the media back into this analysis. How, in fact, does the media conspire with Egyptology, for better or worse? First, it should be pointed out that just the pyramids of Giza alone are fodder for countless television productions, maybe even in the thousands. It doesn't matter to the media that scientists have found no evidence that the pyramids are tombs of the pharaohs. Documentaries on the History Channel aren't going to buck a trend like that. And the media, being an integral partner in the customized history that makes the US and UK look so heroic, needs Egyptology to patch up the narrative. Add 1,000 years here, subtract 1,000 years there. The benefits of fixing the media aren't just avoiding useless and fake news. It may unlock humanity's most clever and surprising secrets. And it might help to explain why the New York Times wants kids to think that King Tut looks exactly like Obama for some reason. Whether you're tuning in through BitChute, Twitch, Brighteon, or by the grace of God, YouTube, whatever platform, click subscribe right now. Sub this channel.
You can always unsubscribe later.
Then head over to peterklein.live for more info and links to shows on your favorite platform. And now we move on to CBS fake corona testing footage. That's right, good old CBS. Back on May 1st, CBS broadcast footage of a scene in which there was testing being undertaken, COVID testing where they shove the stick up into your brain, into your hypothalamus or something. And it was taking place at a place called Cherry Health in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Shortly after, Project Veritas reported that an insider had come forward to report that someone at CBS, a CBS staff person, had requested that personnel at the hospital get in their cars, form a line to create the impression of being busy. In other words, this was one of those drive-through testing things. They wanted to kind of pad it out, right? And we'll take a look at that. But Now, I had to hunt like crazy to get that footage. To find the raw footage, I mean, you could go to Project Veritas' site and you could see heavily edited, heavily overlaid graphics with Project Veritas logos all over. But I wanted to see what was actually broadcast, which I believe I got. Now, I like Project Veritas, and I like that they walk that fine line, but that's fine. But calling out fake news when there may be something else going on is another thing. And I'm unsure who to blame for this nonsense. But let's do this. Let's play the footage. The footage, when it's outlined in yellow, that's the footage in question. So here's the beginning of it. This is to give you a sense of the setting.
Has it been hard for you to get a test?
Not nowadays.
In Grand Rapids.
Okay, now we're looking at this scene inside this tent. Now, if you look, you can see here that there's what looks to be in the background toward the left, just past the tent that they're under here, past the sign that says remaining vehicle. There is this trailer, okay, that's just basically parked there. If we continue on, you'll see
because of expanded criteria
that what
and
they've
more
done. Okay, now watch. See? Do you see what happened there? Now we're looking at the same exact tent, except the cameraman walked around to the other side, and now we're filming facing a new direction. So it's like a whole different lane. But in reality, it's the same tent. We're just looking at it from 180 degrees turned around. So anyway, we'll continue on here.
We found a 25% increase in testing at Cherry Health.
That's the place in question. This is the CEO. This is the woman who later on came forward to claim that, my mistake, I asked some of our staff to get in there to make it look busy, to demonstrate the way the testing is supposed to work and so forth, but
Blackman is the
dubious. And you can see in the background there's the tent that we were just looking at.
So we do have enough testing kits,
and
but
it's
we're really short,
pretty sad state of affairs.
Gowns. We're also short on N95.
They all
Boom. Do you notice that the license plate is blurred? And it actually, when I click play here, you're going to see that blurry spot actually remains in front of the nurse. Even she had it on her. Okay, so I don't know how much they do of that when they're filming this kind of stuff, but I found it interesting that they went to the trouble of blurring this person's, because of HIPAA laws or something, which is probably true. But how often do they really do it?
Testing
I'll bet we
because of
could do a
recent
sampling.
staffing
We see
cuts.
they don't do it very often.
But the governor.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so here's footage here of, this is again, Cherry Health. I confirmed that, so it's got the yellow border around there. There's only 6 freaking cars in this line in the first place, okay? And they're being held up by this, I think there's somebody who stands right here and basically puts up a flag or something and stops them from going forward. They go in one at a time. There's a sign that says to turn your car off. And then they have to get the thing jammed up their nose, however long that takes. So it's probably a couple minutes per car. And it does not look like it's backed up.
To fully reopen.
Some people will think we should move fast.
It doesn't look right, does it? Anyway, look, there are far more egregious examples of shenanigans like this. But I think it's important to start focusing on fake news of present-day topics. That brings us to a topic I'll cover very quickly. Have you ever used the Internet Wayback Machine? It's at archive.org, and it captures copies of web pages over time. So, they've got a fairly comprehensive database of old content to reference. You know what? We'll just take a look at one, for example. Let's just have, let's take a look at McDonald's.com. I mean, there are only so many you can come up with that will be an instant joke. All right, so it looks like the earliest one, this may be the first year they operated. So 1996, and then you go down here. Earliest copy they have is right here. Wait. Click on the golden arches to continue. Sometimes they won't have Maine. McDonald's.com/Maine. Here it is, guys. Wow. Just click on the adults or kids and to your right and enter our site as a grown-up or a child. If you're interested in the fine print, now is an opportunity to check it out. Legal. Yeah, I'm interested to read your frickin' fine print. Yeah, the legal. Anyway, the point is this. I'm going to share with you something else that archive.org has that I think is pretty cool. So what you do is you go to archive.org. .org. And then you scroll down till you find Television News Archive. Or Television Archive News. You see that? You click on that. All right. And here's the format they start you off with. So in the case of that CBS testing footage, you'll click, let's say, 2020 first, right? Trying to narrow it down, put some filters on that. And then, let's see, how about this? CBS This Morning, Michigan. And we're still 2020. May. Let's just pretend as if I had scrolled all the way down to find May. And then you get something like this. Pretty cool, huh? So this is what you're basically left with. If you look at the bottom, you've got a side scroller here. Okay. And then if you go up top, you can see here it gives you the range. So this is just a 1 hour range. So each one of these clips is 1 minute, roughly. So if you want, you can click on, hey, there's a toy giveaway. You click that.
All weekend long and continues through tomorrow from 10 to 2. The charity expects to distribute.
And you note that it's also got the transcriptions down below. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. It's pretty good. Now this also gives you through this method, you're able to get the programming, the commercials as well, and even the station plugs are all. So if we scroll along here, you'll probably see hey, look, a commercial for kids who need to be put on Ritalin or something, I'm assuming. More commercials for things that you need to be afraid of. And here's a commercial for people going out to eat, but can't eat because their mouth is covered with this fabric mask thing. It's quite a conundrum, I find. If you look here, sometimes it doesn't turn up because it takes so long to load, but there are collections here, okay? So there's like, for instance, MSNBC West is a single collection. It's only got 137 in 2020. But then you go down here and you've got creators, and this is where there's maybe, hundreds of them. C-SPAN, Fox News. If you click more, you'll get the full list, but that gives you a sense of how you can drill in and start getting stuff by category or by creator. It would be kind of fun to see what's being put out by like Bloomberg or something like that. So anyway, bookmark this for future reference. It's good stuff. Over the years, I've received emails and comments from people saying things like, "Your videos have changed my life," or "I've become accustomed to your voice," and other corny sentiments. Those messages did get to me.
What a freaking nut job!
My plan is to focus on independent news production full-time, supplemented by my freelance work and, you guessed it, supporter contributions. So, if you've ever made a contribution to James Corbett, Tim Pool, or whomever, please consider doing the same for me. A one-time contribution by PayPal or monthly contribution by Patreon. For $5 or $10, patrons will get access to a weekly live stream I'm working on, which I'm calling Apocalypse Workshop. Learn how to not only survive, but thrive in Clown World. So head over to either paypal.me/TNN or patreon.com/Peter Klein and give, if you're able. And if you don't support my work, how could you live with yourself? By the way, patrons will get immediate access to all my videos from both TNN and IMS. I think it's well over 150 programs and documentaries. In my last episode, I mentioned that the most serious problem plaguing astronauts during excursions in outer space is their fingernails falling off. But that phenomenon was just the spark that reminded me of some great work which challenges the media narrative of space exploration and of NASA itself. So right now we're going to look at a few of my favorite examples of potential deceptions, specifically involving the Apollo moon missions, but also a couple other things as well. So, First, we begin with parallax is the difference in the apparent position of objects caused by shifting camera position. The bulk of my examples are contained in a single article which appears at analyst.com, which is AULIS.com, a fantastic site devoted to examining and challenging space-related topics. The article I'm referring to is called A Stereoscopic Method of Verifying Apollo Lunar Surface Images. That just sounds tasty. It was written by Oleg Oleynik, formerly of the Department of Physics and Technology at Kharkov State University in Ukraine. So, but it's truly good stuff. So check that article out, but I'm going to walk you through a few things I think you'll find that are pretty curious. So first I took two images that he uses to describe parallax, and I am going to use them to attempt to explain the general concept. So we're going to go right here. For our purposes, the goal is to use this technique to estimate distance of an object from the viewer. So we'll do this by determining the relative position of objects, and we'll do that by creating a sense of dimensionality, by creating a stereoscopic image from two separate images. That was, all right, that was quite a mouthful. So best to just dig in. The concept will become clearer as we move along. So here is that first image, and the object we'll attempt to gauge the distance of is the building in the background here with the smokestacks, okay? 1 and 2. Definitely got some shifting camera position action as I flip back and forth between these two images. Okay, now I'm going to take this second image and I'm going to move it over until it matches the first image as closely as possible. And that's going to give us this image right there. Okay, now that required both moving along the XY and also doing a slight rotation. We're really trying to do a comparison, but we need to see how close we can get these two images to be to each other. Okay, so it doesn't really matter which one you start with either. And so this is the result of that. Now, as I flip back and forth, whoops, pardon me. Look at this. I'm going to do this just a little bit. Notice the smokestacks appear in the same spot. Whoops. See that? As I shift back and forth between the images, we're going to do some overlays here. So I want to make sure that these color overlays can be seen. So we'll just grayscale it for our purposes now. So the next step is to define the horizontal center, which is also the position of the viewer or the camera, okay? So to do that, we just draw that line, okay? So I guess the best way to say it is, well, really is just to show. Let's do that here. So there we go. As you can see, from this point out to the left side of the object, and then again here to create that V, that vector shape. And you'll note also that the object is not perfectly centered in our photo as well by doing this. But this is what we need to do. What we need to make sure that that bottom does point at the center of the shot, okay, or of the photo. Now we're going to draw a circle with a center point, and that's going to be right here in blue. So the challenge now is to find an object in the foreground that we can use as a guide for drawing a second vector in that second photo. Luckily, there are two dandelions that flank our first vector, which I will circle in red here. So see those little red circles? Okay. So from that, we can now estimate where the bottom of the second vector should point. If we just simply shift to the next image here, boom. So I'm just going to go ahead and move them over so now they're in alignment, and that is what's going to give us the ability to draw that second vector. So from this we can see where the photographer took both pictures from. He was standing here in the center, and we get a sense of where this person was standing there. Now, as I go back, it's jumping all over the place. So as I go back and forth between these two images, first image, second image, or second image, first image, whichever it is, you can see lots of movement in the shot. I mean, there's considerable movement. For instance, there's the power line tower that is just to the left of the smokestacks that you can see. Notice that power line tower is going back and forth, left, right, okay? So do most objects in the scene. But the smokestacks don't appear to move at all. One could say they have zero parallax. Objects further than 2 kilometers distant with a minor camera shift have zero parallax. Okay? So we can say with confidence that the smokestacks are at least 2 kilometers away. And that's really the key here, because now we're going to move to some moon pictures. All right. So the first example I have of this technique used to challenge the Apollo moon photography. On Apollo 15, astronaut David Scott takes a series of images to form a panorama of the setting. Again, with credit to Dr. Olejnik from the article at analyst.com, 2 images are selected from that series of photos, okay? And this is the first image. That's the second image. First image, second image. You can easily see the common elements, including the terrain in the background, the rover, and the lander as well. Now, I've chosen to use the horizon line as the common element to align these photos. My goal is to determine the distance between this lander, or the photographer taking the picture, and this, I don't know what you would call that, a circular depression that's behind the rover at the right there, which, by the way, is called Crater St. George, pardon me. Crater St. George, just behind the rover. So here, in this next shot, I've tinted everything above the horizon blue. And after aligning to the horizon line, here is the second shot. So again, now we've got those 2 images again. Image 1, image 2. Now I'm going to do this a few times, and I want you to look very carefully at the movement that's taking place. Note that there's movement of the crater between the shots, but not only movement along the XY plane, but subtle rotation as well. There's an actual twisting of that crater in the between the 2 shots. It's very subtle, but it's there. And there certainly is plenty of movement. So we can safely determine that the St. George crater is less than 2 kilometers away, right? Based on what we learned. Here's the thing. There's a problem. Here's the topographic image of the area, which notes where the lander is located. Note the scale on the right, and then compare that to the distance between the lander, marked yellow here, and the crater, which is just above it right there. So look, the crater is 5 kilometers away, maybe closer to 10 kilometers. So I won't bother to speculate what would be causing such a discrepancy, but we can see here that there's a problem. Unexpected differences between the Apollo still photos and films. Now, in the films we're all familiar with, astronauts are frequently and typically bounding about and in an almost carefree manner. You know what I mean? They're really kind of freestyling it, if you will. More often they are scuffling and shifting about the soil than firmly and distinctly planting their feet and creating those shoe prints that we've seen so often in the film footage, that is, photos. By contrast, the still photos, that still photo record is comprised of mostly calm and deliberate, almost lifeless figures. Even considering that still photos don't capture animation, it still stands in stark contrast. So in this first set, 1, 2, 3. In the first set, there are other problems that have given credence to some theories involving small models being used as stand-ins for the astronauts. there are many detailed analysis of these particular images, but my interest is primarily in the lack of movement between each shot. So again, here's the first three. 1, 2, 3. You don't get a sense from these images in this panorama, the ones that were taken in sequence, I'm assuming, 1, 2, 3. Actually, I confirmed that they're numbered in sequence. 1, 2, 3. And then in the next one, we have very similar. 1, 2, 3. Same thing there. Now, there are many other NASA and Apollo anomalies and suspicious activities. Of course, I'd be remiss to ignore or discount other great discoveries such as the airbrushed photos, the mistimed communications, right? Where the twin dar tone comes, boop, and immediately there's a response, a return to the call that is too quick, because it takes up to 2 seconds, I believe, for that communication to be heard. So you can't really, if someone's asking you a question and you provide the answer in response to that question, you can't do that before you hear the question. That is, unless you're doing something telepathic, which they could be, I guess. Anyway, and then there was composited images and unexplained moving objects from some kind of breeze or what have you, amongst many other things. But this is just a chance for me to share some lesser known findings. So here are 2 images of the same astronaut, one taken with a black and white film cartridge and the other taken with a color film cartridge. The astronaut poses in nearly the exact position. Now the footprints and shadows, you can see there's a subtle change in the shadow angle here between one and the next. First one, next one, first, next, first, next. And then the very fore of the photo here, you can sense there's a little bit of a change to the footprints here. So we know at least there's been a brief amount of time or longer between the shots. At minimum, it would take time to switch out those, the cartridge, right? From black and white to color or vice versa. So, but look more carefully at the chest of the astronaut. In the first photo, the chest of the astronaut, if you look very carefully here, you will not see something you will in the next. There's no film camera there. And in the next, it's there. Not there, there. Not there, there. Not there, and it's there. There's very little change in anything at all between these 2 images of this particular astronaut. So the reason why this is unusual, more so than you would think possibly, is that this camera thing is attached and has not been recorded in any log as having been detached. Okay, so that's extremely unusual, highly unusual given the strict protocols, okay, that they follow. Now we're going to go to the next image. Okay, we've all seen the famous shoe print of the boots worn by Apollo astronauts. They all wore boots over their shoes, each designed with simple bars that run straight across the sole. In the Apollo photos, the shoe prints are the same, all except for one. Here, just above the normal shoe print at the bottom of the photo, is a print that differs in many ways. It's smaller, it contains curving diagonal bars, and each bar is noticeably thinner. Nothing seems to explain it. I even tried my best to imagine what kind of series of contortions, of shifting, balanced, a pressing of the foot to create this, could somehow create this shape. I could not imagine how it would be possible. And so nothing seems to explain it. And as usual, NASA has made no attempt to. Now, finally, did you know that there was a massive series of tapes of lunar photos taken from an orbiter to map the entire moon's surface? They also went missing too, and that's the other part of this which just seems kind of, what? They went missing. But fortunately, they were later found. Moffett Field in Mountain View, California was at one time an active military base, which had sufficient personnel to warrant a McDonald's restaurant, all to themselves. But once the base closed, the restaurant was also closed. Now, NASA needed a place to both store this enormous collection of tapes and to process them into digital files. And an abandoned McDonald's seemed like the perfect place. I mean, come on, duh. So, here we see how they made use of the front counter and the menu boards there to display sample moon images and related bric-a-brac. Here we see how the kitchen and the storeroom was used to store the tape collection. Apparently they were so concerned about losing them again, someone actually slept there overnight to keep watch over them. I mean, I'm sure that wasn't just a bum who somehow snuck in and was like, "Hey, what's with the yellow things? Oh, I'm going to pee in one," or something. That's all the poking fun that NASA will do for this episode. I'm actually on the fence when it comes to some of Apollo missions. I don't mean to discredit or insult any of the brilliant scientists who've worked for NASA over the years. I'll tell you a little secret. One of my best friends is a career NASA retiree. And even he has doubts about some of their claims. So that's very telling about an agency that isn't telling very much.